our reviews. And since I was around Leah, I figured I would go ahead and do ours together. So I will go first and I'll let Leah go last.
Mine's better.
Leah, what do you think of I rated this?
She rated it really lowly. It's a 2. Boo.
Sadly, I did not.
It's a little dark.
At all. Did not. I do not recommend this.
She hated it so much. In my defense, I read this when I had not read anything dark ever. So this is pretty dark. It was jumping off a cliff into the darkness.
Okay, so if you know me, you know I do not like dark books. I'm pretty strict mostly about what I read and pretty sensitive to what I read. So this was this was out of my comfort zone. I will give it the fact that it is really good writing. And
it's poetic, right?
Very poetic. And I do feel like if you're going to read a dark book, she did a really
it better have good writing.
But also, it's really depressing.
Like, you really want to offset it with a really funny show or funny book.
It's just really gory and graphic.
Just all the bad things. But it was my first deep dive into a darker literary fiction, and it just definitely wasn't her cup of tea.
No.
At all.
No, but I do think there is a time and place for
trash.
Well, showing like how dark something can be. Like, truly it is dark in prison. And I'm sure this stuff really does happen.
It exposes it to
because it's written by an author that I'm pretty sure she works. She works for people on death row.
She's like a lawyer.
I saw that somewhere.
Yeah. I think she's a real life lawyer who decided to write about.
She's a death penalty investigator.
Yeah. Some of her cases.
So I feel like what she writes has to be somewhat accurate.
And it's probably based loosely off of a true story. So I kind of feel like what I loved about the book and what she probably doesn't love is that it exposes you to dark themes, but it's not like they don't exist. Like, it just shows you what's really happening that's corrupt in the world, but you don't really want to know about it.
Yeah, so
I think that's good in that way.
It's weird because I am a historical fiction person, and I really do like
because there were dark things in this
like World War II, but I just don't like when they go too much into detail.
It's like the whole book. I feel like if you're going to talk about a dark theme, you need to have it in pockets. Like, really dark scene, a little bit of something better and more inspirational.
I don't mind when they like graze it, or even if there's like some pockets that are really hard to get through.
Or they reem it at the end.
Yeah, I can handle that, but this was like the whole book.
In the end,
there wasn't anything happy.
So it's a 2-star. I, conversely, rated this a 5-star.
I really thought she would hold this against me.
I know, I almost was like 1 star. But this book was so good. Historical fiction, absolutely. I typically get really bored reading historical fiction, but I love this because it follows a family and it follows 2 sisters and kind of like their harrowing journey through World War II. What I love about it too is that it focuses on the women who really, like she says in the book, they didn't get medals, they didn't get recognition for like being in the army, but they suffered maybe more than anybody because they had kids at home. Well, not more than anybody, but they also had kids at home and they had family issues that they were tending to. And one of the characters in the book, Isabel, she is a very important part in the war, and she does a lot of amazing heroic things. And I love the book because it follows the 2 heroines. They're female, it's female empowerment, but it's also real and raw. And I feel like this was kind of dark too in pockets. Yeah, there were some really there was one scene where there were like skeletons hanging from a tree. So that's pretty dark, but that's just war, right? So if you get to see real glimpses of war and real heartache, but real redemption and also real bonds, like family bonds. And what I love about the sisters is that they go through so many traumatic things, but they still find a way to relate and to love each other through the difficult journey. They've suffered so much trauma. And then inside the book, there are some really emotional moments. I think the very end, everybody will find the ending is super emotional. The story wraps up so beautifully, and I loved it. And I love the writing. Kristen Hanna, beautiful. All of her writing is amazing. I'm trying to find the one part that I loved.
You highlighted a lot.
I did in mine.
But this is my copy.
So I'm trying to find the one that I really loved where she says, he loved a version of me that was like half. It didn't exist in its wholeness. So she talks a lot about how there is a relationship with her son where he doesn't know her entire self. Mm-hmm. And so she goes through kind of like, it's almost like a coming of age story for her. You get to see how her life plays out. And then at the end, she gets to relive the great moments with people that she loves. And she gets to tell her story to the world. So it's great. I loved it. I feel like I will definitely, actually, I grabbed her other Kristen Hanna books today and I'm going to be reading them too. So 5 stars. I thought it was great. What I loved most about the story is that they stay true to who they are. I feel like that's very difficult to do when you're being like thrown into the depths of injustice, political injustice and terror. They stay true to themselves. They don't lose themselves. Mm-hmm. They still have love. They still have compassion, grace, and it's just incredible. I loved it.
Yeah. 5 star. Which I will say, and it depends on how the book's done, because I was thinking about this. I had a really hard time rating this, honestly. Like, I almost didn't rate it.
You're just going to 0 rate it.
I almost didn't rate it because...
Negative rating.
I feel like it's almost unfair to rate a book...
about a real person.
That's super depressing because you were super depressed. Because wasn't that almost the point?
Right. So or like a memoir, like about their real life.
So I struggled because I was like, okay, I was trying to put myself in the place, like, I've watched the movie Anne Frank.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, that's really depressing. But I love that story. It's very hard to watch. It's very raw.
Yeah.
But it's still different for me. And I'm not sure why.
This is sort of like Anne Frank. There's a lot about the Jewish people being persecuted.
And I don't know why this hit me different than something like that. I think it's all just about how the story's done. And I think, like, Anne Frank is a true story and all the stuff is real. If it's like 100% real, I think I have a little more grace for there being some really hard things in the book. Right. Whereas there are elements in this that I'm sure she took
that she probably could have like left.
But because this isn't like an actual true story, she probably didn't have to take some of the things she did.
Yeah. She could have told it in a way where she took some of the true elements, but didn't make it maybe as dark. Yeah. Whereas I feel like they actually did the opposite. They took an extremely dark situation. Yeah. World War II, some of the injustice that happened and some of the killing of like the children, or there's parts in it where women are just shot, like, even with their being pregnant. So I feel like there's a lot of dark things, but I feel like they did it almost like they did it down. They didn't make it so exposing and they made it to where you could swallow the truth, but not be completely like repulsed.
So I do have a little bit of more grace for a true story because I feel like you can't really change like a true story. Whereas I feel like if it's more of a creative story based on real events, you can take a little bit more liberties with not making it, as dark, like putting some lighter elements in it or showing, some elements where there are some good situations.
Well, one of the biggest themes in the book is that it's basically death row. The government wants to enforce it. And they have a lot of people on death row, but the people, there's a lot of groups that do not want it. They think it's inhumane. And so one of the characters in the book, she's actually a lawyer trying to exonerate men and women on death row, finding some type of way to go back into their history and see if there's a way that she can make them innocent or something that they did that was a redeeming quality that they can highlight. So I guess if you were to put a sentence or a question on the whole book, it's like, do you believe in death row? Do you believe it is morally okay to take the life of someone else if they've done a heinous crime? But you also have to consider that the reason they did a horrible crime is because their life leading up to that crime was full of injustice, full of trauma, full of pain. So it's kind of like it poses a moral question. And I feel like that's why I liked it, because I love books that just expose me to things and like challenge me. It challenged me to think like, is it really okay to take a life for a life? Yeah. So I loved that element.
Yeah. And I will say, so it's probably pretty controversial, but I still don't regret reading it. And I think that especially because it's a short book, I mean, it was only like 250 or so pages. If it was longer, I probably would have been a little more frustrated. but I don't regret reading it. I think that it shines a light on some things that I wouldn't have known. And I think that it's worth looking into if you're not bothered by some dark elements in a book.
Yeah.
I mean,
trigger warning.
Yeah, there's lots of triggers. Look them up.
Yeah.
But it does show you, you know, some areas where we can give grace to those who have committed things. Like, yes, were they wrong? Absolutely. But you know, there are some people who honestly suffer mental instabilities that were not treated like they needed to be treated.
Trauma of some kind.
Yeah, so there's just a lot of things where we can help solve, but also prevent stuff like this happening if we were to have looked at like kids and what they were growing up in. So it gives
you compassion. I feel like
does.
what I got from this book is it gave me a new idea of what compassion should look like, even for people who you think don't deserve compassion. Yeah. And that was kind of what I was so moved by in this book. Also, I want to say that Kristen Hanna, as we talked about, this is about World War II, and there are some dark themes in this as well. There is a lot of death because it's during the time where the Jews were being persecuted and the French were being invaded. So it's really, there are dark elements to this, but there's also a beautiful, several beautiful love stories. And so this book, if you're someone who struggles with dark themes, this is great because it's laid beside really beautiful themes of just like raw hope and grace. And I feel like what I loved most about this book is it shows you how to be loving and gracious and compassionate even in the face of death and hardship. So I loved the love story in this book. And this is based on a true story.
Yeah.
This was a true person. The Nightingale took some liberties with the characters in the book, but the real woman, her name is Andrea Dejean. She was a real life hero in World War II who helped a lot of army.
Saved a lot of people.
Yeah, saved a lot of people in the army, helped them escape Nazi Germany. So there's a monument of her. This is going to be a movie. So I'm excited that I got to read it before it's a movie. So I loved it.
And Kristen Hanna does that a lot. She does put a lot of emphasis on showing women heroes. And actually,
women empowerment, yes.
Kate Quinn is another one that you should check out, that she does that as well. And so I love learning about, like, there are so many historical fictions that are about World War II, and I do get that gets, you know, kind of old because everybody overdoes that. However,
a different telling.
What I like about them is they all put like a spotlight on women heroes that you have not heard about.
Or it's from the French perspective.
Yes.
A lot of it is from the American perspective or a German perspective. This is actually from the French perspective of a country being invaded.
Perspective.
Or a Jewish perspective, yeah.
And I feel like there's so many people that were involved in that we don't know about, that were real heroes. And so that's what I love about historical fiction is I love learning. I love history. And I love learning about these people that risked everything. Yeah. Actually, there was a little thing on Kristen Hanna's site that I was reading the other day, and she was talking about how it poses the real question: if you were put in these events, would you risk your life and your family's life to help those who are strangers?
That's true.
Would you actually do that if you were put in that situation?
Yeah.
I mean, that's crazy.
There are a lot of situations in this book where there's a mother who's conflicted between protecting her own children, but morally being challenged to protect other people's children. Yeah. What I loved about one of the main characters is that she doesn't just look after her own, she looks after everyone. It is a community like effort. And I love that about her too, is that they're not just trying to help. You know, when you're in war or when you're in a dangerous situation, it's very common to think about self first. You know, that's just how we're wired. But she doesn't do that. And that's what's so amazing to me is that these people, they didn't think about just their own safety. They thought about helping so many other people. And so it was an emotional read too, because as you're reading it, you realize these are representations of real lives and real stories. So I loved it.
I love it.
It was so moving. So you should read it.
So let us know if you guys enjoyed this video and things like this. Let us know in the comments if you want me to do this again with Leah.
Because we have different tastes.
Books. Yeah, it is fun to be exposed to other tastes and to learn about new genres that you maybe wouldn't have picked up otherwise. Yes. So like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe. And I will link down our Instagrams that you can follow us on as well as Goodreads. So just thank you guys for watching. Bye.
Bye-bye.